this it, or?
One, two.
Well, we need a liaison.
Neil will be here, so.
Is there a liaison here?
Jim's got sick. He's
Jim's not gonna be here?
Oh, that's right.
sick, yeah.
Oh,
So keep us from catching what
Yeah.
we need.
that would be nice.
I put something on your seat.
Hey, Neil.
I jumped from the sixth to the ninth.
You got
So,
seven names.
Oh,
And the ninth was the last one.
How are you? Good to see you. Joe Carpenter, nice to meet you. Hey, how are you? Good to see you.
Hi. I think you're right, unless you wanna take your name and go somewhere else. Out to lunch?
Sat down, I shouldn't have done that.
I know, and then I got a phone call that Chuck would be out.
which one was those? That was August 8th,
28.
28th.
Wait, let me double check.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that sounds about right. And actually, let's see if they got one.
That's for the training, we have to do that.
Or find your certificate. At the very least.
On that form, disregard the dates, cause it's quite stale on the, it's, yeah.
Isn't there another meeting thing that, or training thing that we were supposed to do? In addition,
Well, I mean, through the years, we've had some that were held over and over in conjunction with the Open Planning Commission, and they had speakers in
okay.
the evening. Can't think of anything else.
16 years in the township board, that doesn't count.
Sometimes it's a good way to get questions answered. That's what it really is a chance to go through basics, but then it'd be great to have something like that again, actually. I don't know how or when.
How
I
do we
don't know
go
how
about
it
scheduling
gets
that? How do we do that?
paid for and all that kind of thing. But I think what it is, ideally, you find another body to
Community?
go in with,
Okay.
and all that way you share the costs or something, maybe.
Okay.
It's been, I wasn't involved in, organizing that at that time. But I can ask. Especially since we have some new people as well as refreshers.
Yeah.
Well, let's see, 7 o'clock, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we're good. I'll call the meeting to order of the special meeting of the Planning Commission zoning board of appeals. And we have a flag, so let's make use of it.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
With that, let's have roll call, please.
I'm only doing minutes.
Well,
I'm not the secretary.
okay.
Yep.
Well, all right, let's see, Joe DeGroot, present. Peggy Sue Schaefer,
Right, present.
Neil Anderson here. Joe Carpenter, present. And it's Mike Curtis, yes.
Present.
Member. Okay, with that, any public comments tonight? If so, you have to sign in, otherwise, if not, we'll go ahead and get to the gist of that. This, which is basically approving the minutes of, meeting from October 23rd.
I so move.
Have a motion by Peggy Sheehafer and Neil Anderson seconds. Any questions or comments? If there's no questions or comments.
I wasn't here, do I vote on this?
If you want to
I
abstain, you
typically
can,
don't, so.
you can, yeah, you can abstain.
Yeah,
That's
you
all
can
right.
if you'd like, if you reviewed the recording, you can, if you'd like to abstain.
In that situation. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. And then it's one
I'll
abstention
abstain.
and one abstention. All right, minutes pass. And all. And then the next is approving the findings of fact and recommendation regarding the side yard setback variation at Old Burlington Road. First of all, do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Neil Anderson makes the motion to approve. Do we have a second?
Yes, approve.
I have a second, motion. All right. Any questions or comments?
I would like to just comment, I know I wasn't at the original hearing, I understand that the applicants withdrew. I just would like to say that I went and walked the property.
Oh.
It's a nice property. The size that they were looking for is an appropriate size, in my opinion, for a property of that size. There's a large barn, it's 4 times the size of the space that they're asking for within view. There's 20 feet of property there that the applicant has maintained for the last 17 years before you get to the marsh that's maintained by Prairie Lakes. I wish I was here for the first hearing, because I would have fought probably for trying to
Well,
Get-
what you have to
get that
understand, we're
done.
not here to legislate, what the rules are. That's the village's responsibility. We can make recommendations based on what the existing zoning code is.
Correct.
We base it as it meets it or not. So that's the role of this body, is to basically be the first public voice.
I'd like it,
you know.
I'd like it public record in the minutes for my
That's fine.
statements, because
That's
I've said time and time again that the size restrictions of auxiliary buildings on the properties out here is, in my opinion, it's unacceptable.
You know, so noted. Let's see. And I would recommend that he not waste his time maintaining somebody else's property because of a, you know, somebody could be.
Well, he made a nice
respond to
offer
that.
on, he made a nice offer on the strip of land that he was trying to buy in order to be within the zoning code for the lot line requirements.
I understand that, possibly an offer was put forward, but, I know in a conversation, as the president called me, as he had not received the certified mail, announcing the zoning.
Which we know was signed for and
By somebody.
sent to the correct address.
Somebody and all, but
So that's,
I was told by him that it was not the correct address at the time, prior to what, hearing this, what Carmen related that evening.
right,
But, regardless of that, they were very concerned about no encroachments on their open space. All right, so they were very concerned about that.
that they haven't been concerned about it for 17 years, so.
I don't know what the situation is, but just because you mow somebody else's property gives you no right or claim to it. If it would have been something more for the last 30 years, you'd been, was it easement situations where you've been crossing a piece of property, for example, then that gets a little more tricky as to whether or not what that is, but just, it's like I have people that try to mow the front of my, right away, and I'm going, please don't, if you tip over your tractor, I know the lawyers are gonna come after me, so, so I understand what you're saying, but you have to be careful about that, because, if you do know somebody that's making using your property and something happens to them, you don't wanna be the one getting sued. I don't know.
Well, I would call that trespassing.
Well, technically it is, if you've been told not to do it.
And they also
Well,
have the right
it's-
to turn down the offer.
How would you like it if I started mowing your land?
Right, no, that is trespassing,
That's
and they've been told, they have to be told not to do that, and more.
My point is that I feel like we're here to make common sense decisions for the citizens that live in our township, or our town, the village, Canton Hills, and it doesn't seem like we're able to do that.
We're not here to make decisions, we're here to make recommendations, the village board is the one that makes the decisions, that, we don't have that power.
I understand, but you understand what I'm saying.
No, I understand.
Recommendations, yes,
Sure.
Okay, we're still discussing?
And so, any other discussion?
Yes.
Yes.
Because I believe it started out at 0.37 from the lot line, that the property had the building on the property that was less than, 6 inches from the lot line. They took that building down. That's what they have the variance on. When they took that building down, the variance is now gone. So then you have to apply for a permit to build a new one. So they poured a new footing without getting a permit and came to us and said, oops, it's bigger than we should have, and we'd like 2 variances. And somehow, if we're supposed to advise the board, the trustees on how to not change the rules. I'm not going against him because he's a nice guy or he's got a nice property or anything. It goes with the land, and if the land is deemed not to be able to have closer than now 10 feet, they made it 2 feet from the lot line. His variance before that he got was, he knew it was 3 feet, so he still made it 2 feet, which was closer than what the original Kane County has been for 40 years. So he didn't abide by those rules and then poured for a 2,000 square foot garage. The size has no bearing on it for us making the decision. I know you wanna stick up
Well,
for,
the size,
And that's
application
changed.
was revoked, right?
no, rescinded, they just decided to back out on that, so we're really discussing
Right,
one
because it
thing.
wasn't being allowed, right, so he said, forget it, just,
No, he wanted to be a good neighbor, because there was the exchange between, the neighbor and him and his sons, and they said, well, we don't wanna, upset the neighbors. And so they were the ones that offered to do it, they offered to withdraw it, Kendall. And so in light of that, and then because there was a previous variance, and, Mr. Anderson here, Commissioner Anderson brought that up, that's where it felt like there was some confusion, all that, and so it seemed like, okay, from what the neighbor who lived in the property that had that open space wasn't worried about the open space, cause that's designated and all that. Now there wasn't a talk of, his mowing their open space or anything like that, but, that's why we decided this was a
anybody else here go look at the
combination.
property?
Yes,
And you didn't think looking at it, oh, this isn't bad, this is fine?
it's not approval of the land. To get a variance has to be, as you have said repeatedly, it has to be the problem with the land. He mentioned to us when he came in.
Per zoning that
Oh,
us
sure.
as citizens of any municipality create, right? So we all kind of forget that this is, all was created by people here, right?
It's been, Kane County, when I built mine, it was still 900 square feet for the size property that he and I both have the same size property. So as a comparison, that's the only.
But we would have allowed 2,000 square feet had he connected by a hallway, essentially, right?
You add onto a house,
Yeah.
you can do that.
Right, so
Why
doesn't
didn't-
that seem
why
absurd to
didn't-
anybody?
No, no, because now it's gonna be a different tax level is what'll happen. It's gonna be part of the residence value of the house goes up, or an accessory structure.
So you don't think
You know,
the
it's
value of that
gonna be
property's
that.
gonna go up if he
You
puts a
know-
2,000 square foot garage on it?
It's interesting.
No, but I'm just saying that that's what the benefit to the increased size of a house is in general to the public as a whole, is that, okay, it's gonna have more value. And
So we only
accessories.
approve something so we can get more tax money versus, I mean.
No, I'm just
No,
saying
no,
that that's, you know, I'm
We
just
are
saying,
not
you don't
approving.
wanna.
Oh, no,
you know,
I'm
we're
sorry,
not
I'm
approving,
learning.
we're
I
just
just-
recommending,
Right.
that's
I just
why
don't understand how you would accept a hallway, would be okay with a hallway, but not a hallway.
When you're attaching it, just for instance, if you take the police academy, we had a judge come in, and if you have someone rob your house and rob your garage, if your garage is attached, now it's worse than if it's a detached garage. Even the laws in court for stealing from your garage are different. The rules are there. If I go out on the highway and go, I'm not wearing a seatbelt and I'm driving too fast. And I say, okay, all right, I will wear the seatbelt, but let me drive this fast. We're allowing people to say, okay, I did this, but let me have a variance because I still want it. We have the rules aren't new or created within the last.
Why do we have variances at all? What does this body get to do for the citizens if we have to stick to these restrictions?
What we do is,
as a
what we do
recommendation?
is, we go with the existing rules. We're the first public voice to a petitioner of what the rules are. So they're not just hearing, oh, there was some public, employee that told them you can or can't do this. And I've certainly witnessed situations where that sort of happened, and then in hindsight and looking backwards on the whole situation, it turned out, no, it didn't apply because the property in that question was a separate parcel. It was the old, two residencies on one parcel kind of issue. So I understand how that can happen, but it is critical that we're given what the rules are by the village, what they approve. And then we present that to the public, this is the thing. And technically, if the variance is supposed to be a hardship of the property, not an inconvenience to the owner or whatever, but a hardship because the government or something has happened, geological forces, whatever, that have made it impossible now for the setback line to be 10 feet because they've lost 10 feet to a road being expanded. And so that's where it's a hardship to the property, am I correct in?
Right, the
Yeah.
elements in the zoning ordinance, 3 of which are required to be met for variation, speak to that. It's a hardship on the property as distinguished from inconvenience to the owner. Excuse me, and it's due to the unique circumstances that are just inherent to the property, not to what the individual or owner is trying to construct.
So
You
that's
have-
where
if
I'm
you-
always surprised that we do see some of these variance appeals coming forward, which really don't fit that as being an appropriate thing. And that's where I'd like to see if special use had some more latitude, where special use can expire, but, so in other words, you're allowed to have, let's say, some simple, business farm zoning on your store as long as you own it. But then once you sell it, that becomes extinguished. But the problem is, if you build a structure, if it's a physical structure, the special use can't extinguish the structure apparently.
A good example, or a simple example, and I'm not entirely sure if Campton Hills zoning ordinance has this, but a lot of them do. If you are expanding an existing non-conforming use, even by a minimal percentage, and you would have to reapply for zoning relief. One I've seen a lot is setback, properties that encroach into a setback. Let's say it's an addition to a home, and the person wants to extend the addition by 3 feet or 2 feet. And maybe not even add a second floor to the addition, or there already is one there. But they want to reconfigure the interior of the home, it requires a few feet to be added. It's not really that big of a change to the home itself, but when it was previously built, it may have been in conformance, now it's not. You'd have to get the variation for that. And typically, it's a hardship. If you want, it's a very minimal change to the property, and for you to you can't reconfigure the interior of the home to rehabilitate or remodel that portion of the addition, other than by adding those couple feet. And those are would typically get approved.
So in essence, what all this goes back to is that zoning is a device that's used to protect everybody's investments that they've made into a particular community understanding there are a certain set of guidelines and rules. And if those start to deteriorate, then that impacts other people's property that bought under that set of rules. And so therefore, if you want to have a gravel pit, you've gotta go where gravel pits are allowed. And there are cases like Houston, for example, that has no zoning, so you literally will see a refinery next to a residential, house or neighborhood. So there's that broad range of extremes. LaSalle County, I think, still does not have any zoning ordinances, do they? I don't know if they do. I know that was one that was brought up.
The elements for variation in the current zoning ordinance don't contain as many elements as, for instance, a special use, and special use speaks a lot to, adjacent property owners, property values. So those types of considerations are taken into account at those hearings. It's not as much of a variation, but there are different elements here. But that's definitely something that when you have a special use, could be for a certain type of business, you're going to address how, even if you don't have people in the audience that have objected to the property being constructed in that way, or the structure, you're going to look at those issues.
Because I am next to a forest preserve, I start, and every one of the neighbors that are adjacent to the forest preserve start mowing into the forest preserve. Or if we wanna build within 2 feet of the lot line, and in order to build it, we have to have that construction on the forest preserve property in order to build it. We're always stepping on their property. And that's what we're trying to protect the whole community so that we play fair. It's like the book, Everything I Learned in Kindergarten. We made our book of here are the rules. And that started with Kane County a long time ago. And yes, they can be tweaked. And I think our job, unless you correct me on this, is that we are to hear the public and convey to the trustees what they are able to do. We're not there to make the rule changes, correct?
Yeah, no, it's up to the trustees or to the public to come forward with, amendments,
Right.
proposals, petitions, all that.
We
for
did have that
amendment change.
opportunity though, didn't we?
Yeah.
Or it was never addressed.
When?
The sizes of the auxiliary buildings was never addressed.
Well,
When we went through the new zoning code.
For
the
9
steering-
years?
No, he's talking about when this commission
We
was
talked,
studying
we
it,
talked 10
because
times on chickens.
we had,
We didn't talk about sizes of buildings.
and, that was what was, alright, so what happened was there was a steering committee for a number of years going through all the details of everything, and with various individuals appointed to that steering committee that had rank in different positions. So for example, whoever's head of this commission at the time would have been on that steering committee. The presidents through the years of the village, they were on that committee. And then they had the consultant from that, Camiros, who had specialized in municipalities and communities and their zoning reviews and establishing new or changing whatever. They provided input, and then that study committee then said, well, okay, that sounds like it fits, that doesn't sound like it fits. Then once that was finally drafted, and that took a long time, then it went to this commission, and then we put it out there to the public to have input from them and from commissioners and all about any of the topics that were there. And so, certainly, we saw it in the public hearings too, which were the most interesting topics to the public, and they brought those forward at that time. So, but,
If
yeah,
these
but-
people are going to, anybody who's coming in for a variance, and they've already done something, they didn't get a permit to do what they did, and now say, I want to correct this by getting a variance for something I've already built. Does that make sense to you? I mean, that means I
Do you
can.
know how much stuff is done in just our little village alone without permits? I can
That
list off.
doesn't make it
I
right.
can list off 10 houses that have finished their basements and put full second kitchens in them, and it's not a problem.
How is it not a problem when it's not right?
well,
It's not, you're saying it's not
It's not our job to
right.
go after them.
Exactly,
Well,
exactly.
Yes, Mike. Let's hear from Sasha.
Would the King County approve, would they have approved or given a?
No, because their provision is 900 square feet based on the acreage. So, and that's what we adopted.
That's what I'm trying to argue.
That's- well, I think that's
Is
what
that
all-
the square footage, and the square footage is too small for what we
I mean,
allow.
if King County says yes, I think what Joe, you're saying is us as Campton Hills should then agree with the county's
Well, no,
permit, if they say.
no, what
Is that what
happened
you're
is
saying,
this,
Bill?
is that when we formed as a village,
Yeah.
we adopted the Kane County zoning code, alright?
And
And
that
then
zoning
through
code
the
would
years, they
allow-
tweaked it a little
Sure.
bit
Would
here
that,
and
would
there.
that then allow?
900 square feet with this particular size
I think it's
acreage.
under 2 acres, you can only.
Yeah.
have 900
Yeah.
So that really is what, is that kind of what it boils down to, I mean, that's.
And so that was the standard, well, I think they're taking into consideration, your septic field and
Yeah.
then trying to have some openness to
So
the
this
property.
person that poured this foundation prior to getting a permit,
Yes,
he would not have been granted a
a
permit.
2,000 square foot foundation, and he knew he was limited to 900.
King County would not have.
It would have
No,
been through the village.
the village
He
is
would
the
not have
one
been
that
given a
does
And he
permit,
would not have been given a permit.
not for that size.
Right.
Yeah, and that's the thing, in most construction, especially construction of structures, you better get yourself a permit
Yeah,
now.
he should've got a permit on
Right.
it for
But if-
something. for
It's
something
doubtful
like-
that your neighbors are gonna gang up against you if you
Right.
put a hot water heater in your basement
Yeah.
without a permit. Alright. Now, there may be a legitimate safety concern for that they wanna make sure that the installer is doing it
I have one
properly.
other question,
Fine.
if Campton Hills approved this, would King County give him a permit to build?
No, King
Or
County
King
has
County-
They
nothing
don't
to do
need
it.
it, they don't need it.
I'm sorry.
They don't, King County's
Yeah, I
totally
can
out of
see
the
that.
picture because municipalities have more power than
Okay.
counties do. Municipalities overrule counties,
Oh,
that's
okay,
why
okay.
Chicago can call the shots in Cook County, even though
Sure.
it's outside the city of Chicago. And all,
And so I think what Joe's saying then
And
is
build
to.
houses that butt up against each other, but a guy who wants to build a 2,000 square foot
I see.
garage
So
with
we-
an acre and a half, that's next to an open marsh
I agree
for
with you.
acres is
I think-
ridiculous, you know, it's
yeah,
like,
yeah.
and I understand what you guys are saying, I'm not trying to argue that.
No, I
just think
understand. No,
It's all
no.
very
It's
absurd
like
to
my opinion would be, I'd rather see everything in 5 acre lots or larger
Well-
in our community, but, you know, that's.
So this is
that's-
not an
that's
eyesore
opinion.
for the public,
It's,
it would
well,
not have been,
no, one of the neighbors was very concerned about it being too large.
They were concerned about it being too tall,
Okay.
And all.
but it would not have been any taller than the existing house.
Well, but
In
the
fact-
ironic part
In
about it
fact,
is if
height,
they
it would have been
attached
shorter than the peak of the existing house.
Oh, interesting.
So the height of the,
I'm kinda with Joe, I may have agreed to maybe look at this and say, hey, this, even though, but you don't wanna set precedents?
So
is
you
that what
make
you're saying?
exceptions.
Well,
that's the
you-
point,
When they make
that's
a
the
mistake.
We
point of
can't,
that.
you see, we can't do that per se, because the village trustees are the ones that make the
Sure.
final
Oh,
decision.
yeah, definitely.
And so technically with this, this was not in our, well, I don't know if it was in the, discussion or not all that clear, well, it was, that a concrete foundation had been poured, permit hadn't been applied for. It's still up to the village if they feel that, hey,
Definitely, yeah.
why didn't you get a permit? You know, that's up to them. We have no enforcement powers. So we recommendation. And in some ways, and I've seen that we used to deal a lot with developments that were coming in, their area here and such, through the 80s and 90s, with the county, and there were so many meetings that provided room for public comment, no problem with that. But there were so many of them that for the average person, they might drop in on one meeting and
Okay.
register their 5 cents and then disappear and not be heard from again. And so that's where it's a way to be sure through the process of planning and development and all that, there's room for people to participate, but they've gotta be sincere and they've gotta follow through if they wanna have the least hope of an
Thank you.
impact.
Jerry,
Alright,
at all.
next topic. What's the next
can
topic?
you possibly say also in the fact that once you approve a variance for this, you then open the door for me to come along and say, I'm gonna put my footings down and say, oops, I made a mistake. Now I'd like
I'm
a
not sure
variance.
that's the order of events that would take place again, I don't know if I agree.
Well, then I'm gonna come in for a variance
No.
to do it with a
No.
permit.
No.
You're setting precedents,
How often does something like that happen?
but you're setting precedents to allow it.
The thing is that potentially the village could say, you've gotta tear that out. So I think all in all, what we're suggesting is a reasonable, kind of thing between the neighbors and, the individual. I think we're cutting him a lot of
Yeah.
slack, quite honestly, on the one hand, but that's still up to the village to decide. Because they may feel that, oh gee, you know, if they'd done this and this, then it wouldn't, you know, who knows? But I appreciate all this because it's a way we can get feedback from our attorney, because a lot of this is complicated from a legal standpoint. It's also, in as much as, you know, I have preferences, Joe has concerns and such, which I understand. Unfortunately, that either has to be expressed, during whenever major changes are being made, like the process that was went through, or or brought to the village trustees to propose an amendment or whatever that, and all, and it's possible to, please.
In the process that's coming up, right? They're gonna be going through it again and creating a zoning commission?
They're creating simply a group to review and make sure, are there any specific issues that they want to address as a village board? It's
And I
not
can-
going to be, they're not gonna go all through the whole process again, no.
I can talk more about that too after we vote on this issue.
Sure.
I'll have actually some.
And that's where this conversation is important, because we really, the other thing we have to realize is the fact that this was a public hearing that we're now approving, the findings to. We can't introduce any other issues, evidence, or whatever to it, because it was a public hearing. And if you were to try to do that, you basically have to petition to open a new public hearing or something like that, or.
Sure, the village doesn't have the commission doesn't have the opportunity to do that.
Right.
The applicant could say that there was a violation if there were evidence considered tonight that was not included in the public hearing.
Right.
So, the commission,
So we're sort of stuck with what we approved.
Right. It voted to
last time,
approve,
regardless of how any
Just
of
wanted
us
to say
feel.
my piece.
Oh, yeah, no, that's important, that's very important, Commissioner
so
Carver. Yeah, no.
the findings that were drafted, for this evening, these will go to the village board on the 19th, so next Tuesday, if they're approved tonight. The additional conditions that you added, and that we discussed at the last meeting, they can be adopted by the village board as is. They can add more conditions, they can remove some, or they can deny variations being requested at the village
And
level. That's up to them.
The neighbors, and possibly if he felt it was necessary for him, he couldn't attend the last meeting, but the president of the homeowners association, if he or their representatives wanted to put any concerns forward to the village, at that point they could. It's just that, in general, and this is what I witnessed with all the times we dealt with developments in this region through the years with the county, quite often by the time it gets to the zoning board, there's a lot of almost decisions that have been made in effect, or there's a good impression of how it's going to go, so you really gotta be involved all the way straight through, if you have concerns. I know it takes time and effort, but if it's important to an individual or a group, they really should be encouraged to do that, because, sometimes the final decision can be influenced by what the community thinks, in spite of sort of the attitude that, oh, once it gets to a certain level, the powers that be, they've already rubber stamped it or something. So it's just citizenry, civics, and the challenges of governance in this country with such many diverse opinions and ideas. Here's our expert. He's been a former township supervisor and township trustee for years, and he's wisely being quiet, so I'm gonna prod him and say, you have any comments, Commissioner
You're gonna
Anderson?
poke the bear?
No, I don't think there's anything to add. I don't want, we don't wanna muddy it up any more than we've already.
Yeah, and this is just discussion. It's not really any hardcore, minutes or anything like that. It's just the fact.
Well, I would just say that
We're just.
If the community doesn't like, for instance, the 900 square feet, then the community needs to come out and change it.
That's what I'm trying to.
That's the proper way to do it. Currently, we have 900 feet on.
It's on record though, that
currently we're on 900 feet, and so we're hoping that everybody follows the 900 feet at this time.
And the setbacks.
Because that's what we have on the books.
Yep.
All right, any other discussion or questions? All right, let's take a vote for those who, are in favor of approving, the findings of fact and recommendation regarding the side yard backside variation at 39 West 910 Old Burlington Road, please say aye. I can do a roll call or?
And the setback that we're agreeing to is the 2 feet that they built.
Well, that's what we approved in a public hearing.
That's just what I'm trying to clarify for them.
You know, the variance still stays.
Right.
We're just asking him to follow the 900 feet. And he agreed to that.
Yeah, you agreed to that.
And I think he's probably gonna take, if he had come forward the first time, you know, for a building permit, I think he probably would have changed the design. And he probably would have added it onto the house, which would
Yeah,
make
it's
more.
And he could
It's-
still
it's
do.
unfortunate.
Would
He could
make more
still do.
sense, yeah.
Could still do.
It'd probably be cheaper for him to add a breezeway and get his 2,000 square feet than it would be to tear out and put in a new foundation wall.
But we have a vote, so all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
One.
I thought you were gonna do a roll call, sir.
Oh, okay, we'll do a roll call. So, all right, Commissioner Anderson
Yes.
said aye, Commissioner Carpenter, aye, Commissioner Curtis.
Aye.
Aye, Commissioner Seaver,
Nay,
nay, and I, will vote aye. So with that, the motion passes. And in some regards, just in general, quite often, it's not a bad thing to have, non-unanimous votes. Because, that makes it where at least there's evidence that, it's just not blanket approved. And all, so, but typically, we probably this would have been approved that evening and all.
Right.
Right?
Right, so for future
it's
meetings,
unusual.
Yeah, why are we here?
Yeah.
for future meetings, we can approve them, so we'll come to a consensus as to vote, and
Right.
then we can discuss the findings, and any conditions, we'll take notes on those. And, we can do it one of two ways: you can just direct staff to prepare the findings, or we can have staff, probably the building and zoning officer, just prepare draft findings for that evening, and we can, you know, write in any conditions, and then we'll type them up to be for signature, so, you know, I'll have Jim Brown, who's the building and zoning officer, prepare them.
Yeah, so who do we have and what? I'm confused. So Jim Brown is the gentleman who is doing
He's the building and zoning officer.
building and zoning, okay.
So he'll, for future
So
meetings.
he's going out and doing inspections or he's the one that's people approach for permits?
He works with the permit clerk, to review and coordinate, permits, but he is in charge of any zoning applications that come in. Reviewing those, working with any outside agencies or village attorney to review those, and then preparing them for hearing. So he'll coordinate public notice, sign posting, publication, and then for any future applications, he'll prepare the staff report, just like.
So he then does the staff report to us to say, this is what's being proposed, this is where the village rules are, and so on. Okay, then, who is the village administrator?
Mark Rooney.
Mark Root.
Right.
So he is not necessarily involved in any of that process? then?
No, from a supervisory standpoint, but he wouldn't be involved in the review of the application if it didn't, unless it,
Okay.
other significant issues.
Is Jim new, or is he?
He
been-
is. He started a few weeks back, and he was just, he's working on a part-time basis. He was just formally appointed to be the building zoning officer last week. So his formal title now, mainly, you know, he's still doing the work already, but because he's gonna be involved in the zoning commission work and review the zoning ordinance, we need to have somebody who was officially appointed to that title. So,
Okay.
he's taking to it.
we're not, can I do a little comment? Only in the fact that he's a very pleasant gentleman,
Mhm.
cause I said James Brown, I start to sing every time I talk to you, and he said, he used to work in an office with also a Michael Jackson who worked there.
Yeah, he's great, he's really great to work with.
You need to close this
So,
first, or?
So we've got this approved, and then, and also there's nothing else that we have to do with that, right?
No, the only other thing, just wanted to mention was that, the zoning commission has been formed, they're going to be reviewing the current zoning ordinance, and any recommendations for changes in conjunction with Mr. Brown. There'll be hearings for the zoning commission that will be open to the public. You have been named as liaison to the zoning commission,
Yeah, so I'll report back to you all.
report back to the commission, and if you have as a group, recommendations or things that you'd like to have discussed, I think it'd be important to let you know, and that you can bring them into the meeting.
It's, Ralph Frederick, who is one of the, village, well, he was on the planning commission, I think, when the village started, wasn't he? Something like that.
He was former chair, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then, Joe Grabowski, who's been involved with the township's open space, program, and Joe served on the town trustee.
He's
Trustee and all, and I forget who the third person is, do you recall? Oh, Holly,
There were,
We have 5 people.
okay.
James Kopek, Terry Lynn Turney, Wolf Frederick.
Kopek. So, do you know, so what were the names, Holly?
James Kopek,
All right,
Terry Lynn Turney,
Terry, Lynn,
right, Turney,
Turney,
Rolf Frederick, and that's
Joe
all so
Grabowski.
far. Oh, right, he was named before.
Chris Type.
That's it, Chris Tite, T-I-E-D-T. And, trustee Millet is the liaison as well.
Oh.
And yourself.
Good.
I'll give you one guess at what I'd like brought up.
And when are they meeting, do they have a schedule?
No set date yet,
Yeah.
first meeting in January.
Sometime in January.
And they're gonna go through each chapter.
You still wanna
meeting.
put that carousel in your backyard, I know.
Will they put that online, the meetings?
It will, yeah.
See that?
Yeah, it'll be, I'll post it.
All right, that's all the business we really have to do tonight, so.
I move to adjourn.
Move to adjourn. Peggy Seifert, moves to adjourn. Commissioner Anderson seconds. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, motion passes.
Is there somebody in there, Gary?
I have no idea.
Finished up.
Oh, see,
What?
I have no idea where you got that carousel.
okay.
Oh, no, I'm just
Yeah,
thinking
he
of
just
something
made
fun.
up something.
Alright, we've
Well,
restored
did you ever,
them
did you
for
ever,
40 years, so
did
that's
you
why.
ever see one, did you ever see
I built a
San
shed that was under
Francisco?
200 square feet, I think, or whatever that minimum is, so I didn't have to get a permit. But I think it's too close to the lot line, so.
Well, then we'll come and make you take it down.
Well, it's not in the ground, it's sitting on railroad ties, so it's not a permanent structure, I'm all good.
As long as it's not over your septic system. My
It is not.
friend,
It is not.
my friend
Then
in
you
West
slide it
Chicago,
over.
2
I
lots.
could if I had to, I could slide it over if I got the right equipment.
No, did you ever see San Filippo's house up in
I
Barrington?
sure
I don't have to deal with us in there.
Yeah.
We've been-
You know, no, the reason why I mentioned Carousel, San Filippo, who owned Fisher's Nuts and
Yeah.
all, he's passed, but he had this 100-foot facade from France for an indoor carousel, cause there was a way they could sell food and drinks by having a carousel ride. And then he had the carousel that I think was 65 feet in diameter.